Google's plans for a Hermantown data center continue to ruffle feathers here in the Northland.
Yeah, the issue coming to a head Wednesday during a meeting in Hermantown after 4 people were kicked out of a Google open house.
Now, one of them is talking to us tonight about what he experienced at the open house. Northern News Now's Leslie Krebs shares his frustrations. Leslie?
Yeah, Dana, Laura, Jonathan Thornton was one of 4 people kicked out during last night's open house. He says it all started when he attempted to submit a question and it couldn't be found. He says when he spoke to someone with Google about the problem, he was then asked to leave.
Lies and deceit. Lies and deceit from Google.
Lies and deceit. Those were the words Jonathan Thornton used to express his frustration with the proposed data center in Hermantown as he was escorted out of a meeting Wednesday night. Thornton says it all started because he says Google wouldn't answer his question.
The behavior that has been revealed over the last few weeks, does that behavior fit the Google ethical standard?
He says he followed the guidelines and submitted his question asking about Google's perspective on the recent Hermantown behavior, referencing when some city leaders were heard making disparaging remarks about those against the project in a leaked audio.
And I said, well, I just want to know how I get my answers or get my questions into the queue. And when I asked that question and when I mentioned to her that I think that they're being screened, as soon as I said that, she said I need to leave.
During the open house, Thornton says several others were kicked out when pressing about their questions. He says he believes the questions were screened, so Google can avoid answering them. We reached out to Google. A spokesperson provided this statement, reading in part, Google takes community feedback and questions very seriously. We made every effort to address questions from the previous open house during the presentation, in addition to answering as many questions as possible from residents as time allowed. Thornton says Wednesday's night's incident just feeds more distrust with Google and Hermantown city leaders.
They can throw their open houses, they can spend literally millions and millions of dollars on planning. And it's foolish, in my opinion, because they built all of this on a very weak foundation.
We also reached out to Hermantown city leaders about the incident. They responded saying because it was not a city-sponsored event, they will not be providing a statement. Live in studio, Leslie Krebs, Northern News Now.